Before we can begin, I need to make a few things clear. The segment I'm about to show you is incredibly disturbing. It's not just disturbing in its content, but also in the fact that this was uploaded to the YouTube channel EFDawah under the title Lies, Damn Lies and Statistics, where the viewers of said channel are heralding what was stated as brilliant and well said. Now, the clip originally came from an LBC radio interview, LBC Radio being a London-based station. During the segment, a dawah apologist by the name of Abbas, who regular Speaker's Corner, mentioned the charge of Islam being a death cult, but focused mainly on the facts that the Prophet Muhammad was a child rapist, at least according to popular hadiths. Said segment was uploaded without comment, as with many soundbites that are supposedly gotcha moments, so I wasn't sure at first as to whether EFDawah were taking issue with what Abbas stated, rather than heralding it, but upon further review of the evidence, the way the EFDawah community has reacted, and the close if not professional relationship both Abbas and EFDawah seem to share, I have come to the conclusion that this video was uploaded in celebration of what Abbas stated. Now, it's a short video, so I'll play it in its entirety before returning to comment on it per usual.
0345 6060 973. Let's go back to your calls and comments. This is on the, well, is there a gravitational pull to right-wing politics in this country? One survey seems to suggest so. Abbas is in Redbridge. What are your thoughts?
Hi there. Just a comment that Mr. Gerard Batten made about Islam being a death cult and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, being a paedophile. He said it was a matter of fact. It's not a matter of fact. It's his opinion. The fact that people raise the issue about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, marrying Aisha under the age of 16 and saying, therefore, that's paedophilia, you cannot apply the social consensus, which is how morality is governed within a secular society of the 20th or the 21st century, and apply it retrospectively in the 7th century, and then call it paedophilia.
I thought the whole point about the teachings of Islam was that it was the one religion that didn't change. It didn't alter its core beliefs and systems to appease the age.
It doesn't, but the reality here is this. There are lots of caveats in terms of marrying a young woman. So, for example, the social consensus of that time, the governing law in terms of marriage in Islam, and Judaism in fact, is puberty. Puberty becomes the age at which you may consummate the marriage. Now, that does not mean to say that is when you should marry, but that is the minimum that has been set.
So your contention is that Gerard Batten should have made a distinction between his opinion, which you don't have any truck with, even though you disagree with it, but you believe he's entitled to it, and what he called fact.
Exactly. I talk to lots of people and they say to me, oh, this is paedophilia, when I explain to them that within a secular society, morality is governed by social consensus. It's the social consensus, for example, even in the 21st century today.
OK, on that point, Abbas, we hit the clock, but thank you.
So let's just deal with the bedsheet-clad elephant in the room. The facts that Abbas is responding specifically to Gerard Batten, who is the white nationalist piece of shit that currently leads UKIP. If you don't know who UKIP are, they're the vile far-right British party that recently gained the favour of none other than Carl Benjamin. That guy who likes to send British politicians thinly veiled rape threats between role-playing as a figure of authority. Now, I feel this is relevant considering certain comments made by Mr. Benjamin back in 2014.
Yeah, and of course one of the reasons that age of consent laws came about is because it is sometimes hard to get prosecutions for actual wrongful conduct. And I, as much as anyone else I think, doesn't want people who are really predatory and manipulating and exploiting young people into doing things that the young people don't want to do, but they're too naive to have the tools to say no. You don't want those people to go free. I don't either. But the way that you make those people not go free is not by saying that all the people who are engaging in perfectly harmless conduct should go to prison instead.
Yes, this kind of war on drugs mentality.
Oh yeah, and one of the difficult things, and I haven't played this card with people much until about the last year. Now I'm kind of getting up in people's faces when they talk about age of consent. I was well under the age of 11 when I started having sex, and so what I like to do is put people on the on the other side of the argument. It's like, what you have to do is you have to say that someone like me, not anybody else, but me, that I was too stupid to appreciate the nature and quality of what I was doing at the time. So please convince me I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it's it depends on the child, really, doesn't it? Because some kids
That's what the Catholics say.
Others. Well, it's true, and it's true though. It should really be a case-by-case basis. But I can see why the whole thing. But it's not really something I'd ever put too much thought into.
So after recording my original video, I became aware of the facts that this month, Carl Benjamin had gone on to defend his position on the age of consent as having scientific justification for the exact same reason as offered by dawah apologists, like the one shown at the beginning.
Look, Jim, you can carry on interrogating teenagers about the size of their boyfriend's penises all you want. It's just...
Hey, Carl, don't get upset. I mean,
I don't even know what the context
I love how
of that
you tried.
is.
I love how you tried black PR and it blew up in your face because you're fucking retarded.
Black PR.
Yeah. Oh, I don't get the conversation Jim's having, and now I'm getting accused of the same shit that I tried using. Depends on the child, doesn't it, Carl?
Okay, Jim.
Does it depend on the child, Carl? Does it depend on the child?
Black PR.
It's all by case by case basis. So you're cool. It's case by case basis. We get you, champ. We know what you're talking about.
Jim, it is scientifically verifiable that people hit puberty on a case-by-case
Oh, no,
basis.
please tell me about your ingenious ideas about 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds having sex. You're so smart. You're so smart, Carl.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Batten's comments are rather hypocritical. In my eyes, he, as well as the rest of the sleazebags that make up the UKIP party, can all go fuck a blender for all I care, Benjamin included. But that does not diminish the accuracy of what was stated here in any way. Namely the fact that the beloved Prophet of Islam was not only a paedophile, but was in fact a child rapist. Now if you don't know the difference between the two, a paedophile is someone who is attracted to children, with some of them actually seeking help to handle said feelings, as they understand and respect the human right to bodily autonomy. A child or a young teen cannot give informed consent on the topic of sex, and unlike medical procedures, sex is not a functional necessity, meaning that neither they nor their guardians can make that choice. Meanwhile, a child rapist is someone who actually goes out and rapes a child, and the Prophet of Islam does indeed fall into the latter category. According to some of the most popular and trusted hadiths, the books upon which the vast majority of Islam as practiced is based upon, as the Qur'an contains relatively few details in that regard, Aisha was 6 years of age when she was forced into marriage and only 9 when the Prophet raped her. I feel the need to specify the ages here since Abbas's mention of under 16 seems to be positioned to give the impression that Aisha may have been in her mid-teens rather than her childhood, which still would not be justifiable, but perhaps more palatable to certain sorts of people. Muhammad was supposedly 53 years of age at the time, for proper context. Now I thought the radio presenter crushed Abbas in simply noting the fact that Muslims hold to a supposedly objective and thus unchanging moral code, and therefore historic-based relativism fails as any sort of a get-out clause. On top of this, Muslims view their child-raping prophet as not only God's messenger, but the pinnacle of all human goodness. Muhammad is the standard all Muslims are told to try and emulate. They don't present him as a flawed messenger held down by the times, but a man whose example extends throughout the ages to this very day. This, as well as the apparently all-powerful and all-knowing nature of God, make any excuse the Muslim presents an instant failure that dies on delivery. If the Muslim accepts that child rape is wrong, then the only way this excuse could work, giving the Muslim that said God does exist merely as a hypothetical thought experiment, is if one alters the definition of God as presented by the faith of Islam. God must either lack a timeless moral standard, lack knowledge of all things, or lack power over all things, or lack a mixture of all three. How can I say this? Well, if God truly were all-knowing and all-powerful and child rape has always been wrong, his course of action could have been incredibly simple. Tell his chosen prophet that child rape is wrong. It really is that simple if what the Muslim claims about God were true. Hell, I'd argue one further and say that such a God would not only step in to prevent Muhammad raping a child, but would actively set a law that prohibited child rape and set a clear age of consent. But that's not what we see at all. I, the humanist, meanwhile, can and do say in no unclear terms that child rape, as with all forms of rape, is wrong, that it has been wrong and will always be wrong no matter what. Which leads me on to how Abbas tries to bullshit his way out of the terminal blow he was just dealt by the presenter. Abbas panics, collapsing into this stuttering mess about all the caveats to child rape that apparently make it permissible, such as puberty, which was the societal standard at that time, not seeming to realise that we don't care. The historical context in no way lessens the atrocity, and I urge anyone viewing to be wary of those who tell you that you cannot apply modern standards of morality to historical context. I'd argue that these people don't understand the first things about history and why it's so vital to us as a species. It's not simply a way to tell future generations about where we came from, but warn them of places humanity could lead. Unless we can openly look back and identify, for example, that colonialism was atrocious, we run the risk of repeating said horror in the near future. When a historian warns you of moralizing about the past, they're not on about retrospectively assessing what happened from a modern perspective, but rather avoiding this desire to simply cast our ancestors as mindless monsters, people whose kind we'll never see again because we've evolved beyond that. Sadly, that's not the way society works, and we do very good to remember that. But I can and I shall judge the child-raping prophet of Islam, along with all of those who would defend him. That is my right not only as a secular humanist, but as a survivor. Time does not lessen atrocity, whether it be a day, a year, a decade, a century, or millennia. And we have come to a modern understanding of the age of consent by a careful assessment of the damage caused by childhood rape and a bettering grasp of when one typically has the faculties to make such a decision. The fact that the religion of Islam gets said standard so horrendously wrong is not an argument in defense of what it says, but rather an admission that said book has no right to be taken seriously in any ethical discourse. Now, the only thing I find funny about this whole situation was the fact that the video is titled Lies, and Abbas asserts that the statement that the Prophet of Islam was a paedophile, putting aside the fact that they were also a child rapist, is a matter of opinion. Nowhere did Abbas even begin to address that. Abbas didn't demonstrate how the classing of his 53-year-old prophet's rape of a 9-year-old child was paedophilia was wrong. All Abbas actually did was argue that it wasn't morally vile because look at the time period. Even if his argument had been successful, which it wasn't, that still wouldn't stop his prophet from being a paedophile or a child rapist. And it really is sad to see such filth being lauded by Muslim apologists, including organisations such as EFDawah. Then again, I'm hardly surprised. I've dealt previously with EFDawah's main face, Hamza Myatt, who not only attempted to victim blame victims of grooming gangs which existed not only in primarily Muslim areas, but actually included imams of the faith who stood in court and attempted to justify their rape using the religion of Islam. But Hamza Myatt then attempted to threaten me into removing my response, a threat that was given amongst a barrage of ableist and potentially homophobic slurs. Now compare this to IERA, that's the Islamic Education and Research Academy, who I've also had previous run-ins with in the past. After responding to a video titled Why Do Atheists Preach?, as well as If Darwinism is True, Atheists Shouldn't Preach, uploaded to 2 different channels, hence the 2 names, I contacted IERA about the facts that said video contained homophobic statements. And just like that, both uploads of the video disappeared and it was replaced with a re-recording of an interview on the same topic, only this time with Hamza sources rather than the white convert from the original. Now don't get me wrong, both IERA and EFDawah consist of vile people. After all, they're 2 fronts of the same machine. The only difference is their strategies are very distinct from one another. IERA attempts to give the outwardly appearance of being a community-based establishment, building coherency and understanding whilst routinely pandering to people who have publicly defended the beheading of apostates, i.e. ex-Muslims, such as Hamza sources, to mention a single example. EFDawah, meanwhile, take what may be classed as the Trump approach. They're there to maintain the radical base whilst indoctrinating the newer adherents to the faith into a more fanatical and fundamentalist type. They're proudly unapologetic and come across as foul to anyone on the outside, but given time, their hollow nature infects others and empties them of their humanity, repeating again and again. Ayera is the Jordan Peterson of organizations, funneling people towards EFDawah, which in all honesty is indistinguishable from the far right in many ways. And I'm not just on about the topic of consent. Ayera is the front, EFDawah is the end game. That's why they can promote the rape of children so openly, and that fact fucking terrifies me. Hi there, I'd just like to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Alexia Richardson, John Schoenrock, Alexander Williams, and Daniel Martinez. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years and really is the only thing that manages to keep the channel afloat. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, an organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity or ability both mental and physical will be removed immediately, and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's keep this space one which upholds the humanist values. Thank you.